Now, tonight, what I'm going to do to show you where we're up to with things, now we can't cover every prophecy that has to do with the last days in 1 hour or less, but we're going to have a look at some of the old favourites. But they're a great mine of information, give us a lot of clues as to what should be happening right at the end. So we're going to be looking at... does that work on that? Does that come on? Oh, there it is. That's not the one I want. Back one. There we are. Just getting used to the Collins computer. All right, so now these are the four prophecies we're going to have a close look at. Ezekiel 38, now there's one you had a look at before. Daniel 11, Isaiah 19, and then back to the reading, Luke 21. Now, if you would like to turn to Ezekiel 38, now I've got the New American Standard Version here, and when I'm using this, talking about this prophecy, I like this one rather than say the NIV and the King James Version, because you don't have to overcome the problem where it says Prince of Meshach and Tubal. It actually says Prince of Rosh, Meshach and Tubal. So it makes life easier. Now, what I want to do is go through verse by verse as fast as we can and see whether these things hold true or not. So we start in verse 2. We read of God's opponent, Gog of the land of Magog. Well, first of all, let's have a look at the idea of Magog. Now, here you can get some idea of where that territory was in ancient times when Ezekiel gave this prophecy. If you take the Jewish historian Josephus, said that Magog was the ancestor of the people called Scythians by the Greeks. Now you've got to remember here that Josephus is writing in the 1st century, but the prophecy was given 6 centuries earlier in the time of Ezekiel. So we really want to know where Magog was in Ezekiel's time. So we can start piecing things together. According to Strabo, the ancient Greeks called the northern nation by the general name Scythians, so you can add that into the clues. Diodorus of Sicily in the 1st century BC says that the Scythians lived from Central Europe to Central Asia above India, and Herodotus, who wrote in the 5th century BC, says that the Scythians extended to the river Danube. Now, having a look at this map here, that map that I showed there would fit in with what Herodotus just said, but Scythians and like a lot of those northern tribes in that era were very mobile, and they only got to the Danube by about 450 BC. We have to go back another sort of 150 years back at the time of Ezekiel to work out where they were, and it turns out that they were only up to the River Don. Now, how to describe where that is for a novice? Let's see here. Well, this map that I've put up there now probably does the job. And I'll just make this assertion. I can demonstrate it but we will spend too long on that. But as we saw in the previous map, Magog extended to the Danube in 450 BC, but at 600 BC to the River Don. Now those arrows have slightly jumped out of place. So that territory, if you look on a map of the world today, basically corresponds to the nation of Russia with maybe bits of Belarus. Well, what about Gog? Well, there we are. There's the Hebrew Gog up the top there. And what's interesting is that, I don't know how familiar you are with Russian culture, but, well, with the WikiLeaks leaks of the last 2 years, one of the things that came out about Russia was that it was a grand mafia state ruled over by a whole heap of crooks. Now, there is a term used all the time in Russia to refer to people who provide protection in a criminal organisation, and that word is krusha, and it means roof. But if you go searching a little bit, now in the past you would have been told things like Gog means at the top, but when you pursue it a bit further, like if you look at St. Augustine from 450 AD, he says the word Gog means roof, and if we come into the 21st century and start looking at Jewish websites, you get things like this. The Hebrew word Gog means roof. Or, here's on a modern Hebrew website, Hebrew and Bible name meanings, and you go through the little alphabetical organising system and get to Gog, and it says roof or covering. And so on and so forth. You get the drift. Interestingly, when you go to look at Mr. Putin as leader of Russia, you get quotes like this. Under Mr. Putin, with loyalty and duty, the new coins of the realm for the Siloviki, no matter the uniform, there is one ultimate Khrushchev roof, the Kremlin. Or, talking about Prime Minister Medvedev, Putin would be his protector, his Khrushchev, his roof. He would be his Gog. Putin as Russia's roof. These are all articles you can find on the web. You can even look up on Wikipedia, and they talk about this notion called Khrushchev. And here's another one. Putin is serving as Medvedev's Khrushchev or roof. And another story, what happens when Putin's Khrushchev leaves. Another one, the most important roof. Just ask, the most important one is the Kremlin. Just ask Vlad the Impaler Putin. And again, Putin is the biggest Khrushchev and basic leader of the mafia state known as Russia. How's that? We've connected Gog, Khrushchev, Putin. I'm not saying Putin necessarily is the man, but it gives it becomes possible, doesn't it? Now, what about the next few verses? We see there in verse, I'm in the wrong chapter. I'm against thee, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal. Now, what we see if we start looking for Rosh, I believe Rosh refers really to the Ukraine. And why I say that is that if you say go back to about the 8th century AD, when the name Rosh was first used, it was centred on the city of Kiev, which is the capital city of the Ukraine. Later the name got shifted to Moscow, mainly because the Ukraine territory got taken over by others. But when you start looking at the history of that region where the Ukraine is, what you find, it has a special appellation, always. When the Scythians were there was a special tribe, the royal tribe, occupied the territory of the Ukraine, eastern Ukraine in fact. In the 4th to the 3rd centuries, there were the royal Sarmatians, another group of tribes from Central Asia had come in. And they were sometimes called the Basilians. Now, you think of royal, Basilians. Anyone know what Basilian means? Who's called Basil here? Anyone called Basil? It's the same as William. It means king, all right? So you get the connection. From the 2nd to the 6th century AD, there was a group there called Rox, or Roxolani. They were Alans, so they're more Iranian, but still there's a special connection with the eastern Ukraine and a name of Rosh. And then, of course, the state of Kiev was called Ros by the Greeks, the very same word that appears in the Septuagint in Ezekiel 38. That's what they called them. And the Russians did, the Arabs did too. Interestingly, when we start looking at the Ukraine, there's a little bit of a tug of war going on between Europe and Russia over the Ukraine. If we go back to 2004, we had a thing called the Orange Revolution, and it looked for all in sundry that the Ukraine was going to join Europe. But bit by bit, the Russians, putting pressure on the Ukrainians, reeled them in. And so we see there was a turnaround. In February 2010, there was election of a pro-Moscow leader. In March 2010, they resumed joint naval exercises. The same next month, they had a new deal on the Black Sea Fleet. In June 2010, a law was passed to ban Ukraine from NATO. In October 2010, the pro-Russian party of Eastern Ukraine won the parliamentary elections. And in November of last year, they flirted with joining the Russian customs union. And this year, in April, they had an agreement on military and technical matters. So, interestingly, they've been pulled back into the orbit. Now, that word prince too needs some clarification. For a long, long time, probably 20 odd years, I thought the word prince meant just simply ruler, but it has more the idea of a family elder, big brother. And of course, in those group of nations, you got, if you know it, there was Russia. What's called Russia today was called Big Russia. The Ukraine was called Little Russia, and then Belarus called White Russia. And Big Russia was sort of like the elder brother. So the idea of that word prince is the family head. And that's certainly the situation. Now what about Meshach and Tubal? Well, the territory of Meshach and Tubal, if you check out again with Josephus, and I haven't put that slide up, if you go right back through the history of it all, it has to be in the Caucasus region. And if you can recognise where you are with that map, there's a map in the top right-hand corner of the map down the bottom, which shows you where that little square is in Europe. It's in Eastern Europe, almost into Asia, between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And then sandwiched between Russia and the Middle East is Georgia, and the bit with the stripes there is Abkhazia. All right. Now, similar to the Ukraine, Georgia wanted to join Europe as well. Back in 2003, they had the Rose Revolution, and they had a new president getting rid of Eduard Shevardnadze and replacing with a guy called Saakashvili. And Saakashvili was anti-Russian and pro-European and pro-American. And the Russians didn't like that too much, so right at the beginning of the Olympic Games in 2008, you might all remember the Russian invasion of Abkhazia and Georgia. That was the beginning of the big turnaround, and again, reeling in Georgia, which traditionally, for a long, long time, had been part of the Russian Empire. And so, now, why I can write these little timelines is because over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been keeping on PowerPoint, virtually from day to day, all the stories that map the progress of these relationships. So here we go back to 2010. Talks begin again between the Russians and the Georgians. October 2012, a new Prime Minister who's favourable to the Russians. And so again, if you just follow that list down, you see that they're coming back into the Russian fold, as one would expect, as the prophecy demands. When we go to verse 5 of Ezekiel 38, we have Persia, Iran, Ethiopia, which is the Sudan, the Hebrew is Cush, Libya, which is Put, and it always gets translated Libya, but possibly includes some of the other North African countries. Now, what I'm just going to focus on is Russia and Iran. And if you have a look at that list, there's a little list of what's been happening with them. And they've been in the news a lot recently because they are allies, military allies. And if we jump through all of that, you can sort of scan your eyes down through that list. We come to our own year, 2013, February, a strategic partnership. That's how they describe it. July this year, Iran and Russia widening strategic military cooperation due to shared interests, which happen to be Syria. And August, against the background of continued fighting in Syria, Russia and Iran have expanded their political and military relations. They are officially allies, in actual fact. So that's in place. See, what we're seeing here, what I'm doing is just going through the prophecy, just showing you where it's at. Okay, we go to verse 6, which mentions Gomer and the house of Togarmah. Now, traditionally we've said that Gomer, because Josephus says he was the father of the Celts, and the Celts occupied most of Europe, but that was wasn't the case, actual fact, when Ezekiel gave the prophecy. And what is believed is that the Gomer that Ezekiel was referring to were the Cimmerians who lived in the 8th century BC in the Crimea. But the Scythians kicked them out, and they first of all migrated into Turkey, but ended up being pushed out of there into southeastern Europe. And the next map will show you what I mean by that. That's the territory they got pushed into. Now that roughly corresponds to modern-day Serbia and possibly Hungary and Romania. And it's quite noteworthy to see that you can, if you go through the newspaper headlines of the last couple of years, Russia and Serbia are like that, and they have military agreements. They are definitely allies. So what you can do is, there's a map that you can get off the net which showing you, because there's been a lot of recent archaeological work showing where the Cimmerians went to, and in 300 BC they were there and they kept migrating westward. So by the time of 113 BC they'd made their way to Denmark, all right? The Cimbri, if you've ever read about them. So here's a breakdown of Russian-Serbian relations, and that's pretty amazing given what we've just seen. There's a possibility it might include part of Romania, but the Russians already have troops in Moldova, which is sandwiched between Romania and the Ukraine. And in that same verse, back in Ezekiel, that Gomer's mentioned, it's got reference to one of the allies being Togarmah. Now, Togarmah, if you look at the historians again there, the Armenians themselves say that they are the house of Togarmah. That's their claim to fame. And what we find is that the Russians and the Armenians are military allies. And Russia has a pact signed in 2010 which allows them to have Russian military in Armenia until 2044. They're absolute military allies. Fulfills the words. Exactly. It's just a slide showing you in the top right-hand corner there, the Russian military base at Gumri, which is 5 kilometres from the Turkish border. And the next slide says that the Russian forces are to stay, as I said, in Armenia until 2044.
Hi, I'm Mike Steele, and I'm a Christadelphian, and I've been one for pretty well all my adult life. You're probably wanting to know, what does the word Christadelphian mean? It simply means brethren of Christ, and we believe that if you want to be a true follower of Christ, you really need to know what this book, the Holy Bible, really does teach. And we would love to have the opportunity to show you what the Christadelphians believe and how it is based on this Bible. We get very excited about the Bible because it foretells the future in such accurate detail, particularly Bible prophecy. And we believe the return of the Lord Jesus Christ is very soon to happen on the face of this earth, particularly when you look at the prophecies regarding the nation of Israel and Russia and Europe and other nations. You'll be fascinated to know what this Bible really does teach about what is going on in our earth today. We would encourage you to have a look at this website that we've put together for you. It shows you all about the Christadelphians, what we believe, and also what this Bible really does teach. Christadelphians are what we call a lay movement. That is, nobody gets paid anything. So we're not on a recruitment drive whatsoever to get more Christadelphians. We simply want you to understand what this book really does teach and have the opportunity to search out the matter for yourself. So enjoy our website. It talks all about the Bible. It talks about our beliefs, and it even has some of the seminars that we do quite often in our halls. So enjoy it, and if you need to contact us at any time, please do so through the website, and we would be only too pleased to be able to talk to you further about these important matters. Thank you very much.